The Waltons captured the hearts of Americans for 9 seasons, from 1972 through 1981, building its entire legacy on one fundamental belief, that families endure their toughest trials by staying together. Each episode closed with that familiar, heartwarming ritual, lights flickering off throughout the farmhouse, family members calling goodnight to one another through the darkness, viewers across the country carrying that cozy feeling with them long after the screen went dark. But those peaceful bedtime scenes told only a fraction of the story. Behind the cameras, the television family was quietly falling apart. Cast members departed for reasons ranging from serious medical emergencies to intensely personal struggles to complicated professional conflicts. Some of these stories have never been fully revealed, and the event that triggered this gradual dissolution is not the one viewers typically remember. Richard Thomas was just 21 years old when he first portrayed John Boy Walton, the eldest son and aspiring author growing up in Virginia's Blue Ridge Mountains during the Great Depression. The character served as the show's emotional anchor, the narrator, the idealist, the figure viewers identified with most strongly as they followed the family through those challenging years. Thomas played the role from the very first episode in 1972, and within 12 months, he had secured a Primetime Emmy Award for his work. By 1973, he had become one of the most recognizable young faces on American television, which was precisely when his uncertainties began to emerge. Having studied at Columbia University before finding fame, Thomas was a classically trained stage actor who watched his peers establishing film careers that seemed to operate on an entirely different level from weekly family dramas. The longer he remained with the show, the more he worried about a specific professional trap, that John Boy Walton was becoming the only character audiences could ever imagine him playing. The warmth, the gentle narration, the soft-spoken mountain boy with his journal, all of it, he feared, was slowly constructing a professional barrier he might never overcome. By the time Season 5 concluded in 1977, Thomas had reached his decision and informed producers he would not be continuing for the 6th season. The writing staff managed his exit as elegantly as possible, sending John Boy to New York City to pursue his writing ambitions, a plot development that aligned naturally with the character's established dreams. They intentionally left the door open, hoping Thomas might reconsider. He did not change his mind immediately. What followed his departure is where this story becomes genuinely revealing. Thomas found success with solid Broadway work, which suited his theatrical background, but the film career he had envisioned, the one that was supposed to validate leaving a hit show during its peak popularity, never truly materialized. He accepted film and television movie roles through the late 1970s and 1980s, but nothing carried the same cultural weight as John Boy, and nothing resonated with audiences in quite the same manner. The producers faced a significant challenge during his absence. They could not leave John Boy's narrative hanging indefinitely, so they eventually recast the part, bringing in Robert Whiteman to portray the character during seasons 8 and 9. Whiteman was a competent actor who handled the material adequately, but the character never regained the central importance it had possessed under Thomas. The show adapted by shifting more storylines toward the other Walton children, though longtime viewers immediately sensed something was missing. When the Waltons began producing reunion television movies in the 1980s, Thomas returned to reprise John Boy alongside the surviving original cast members. In interviews across the decades since, he has spoken candidly about what that experience taught him. With the clarity that only time can provide, he has acknowledged that he genuinely underestimated what the show represented while he was immersed in it. He had been so focused on what the role might be preventing him from achieving that he failed to fully appreciate what it had actually given him. The character was not a confinement, it turned out to be the foundation upon which his entire career was constructed. Walking away from it at 26, while the series remained enormously popular, stands as one of the more instructive examples of how difficult it is to properly evaluate what you possess while you are standing directly inside it. Gere continued playing Grandpa Walton through the end of Season 5, passing away on April 22, 1978, at the age of 76, during the show's production period. His death required the series to address Grandpa's permanent absence, which they handled by having the character die between seasons, a decision that respected reality without forcing the production to manufacture a farewell episode for a man who had simply not survived to film one. The tributes from his fellow cast members were heartfelt and specific. Michael Learned, who portrayed his daughter-in-law Olivia Walton, described the sense of loss following his death as something the remaining cast felt in every scene they filmed afterward. His political history became more widely known as the decades passed and the blacklist era received proper historical examination. What had once served as a professional death sentence was eventually re-examined as one of the more shameful chapters in American institutional history. Gere himself carried that history without apparent bitterness, which is remarkable in itself. He lost years of his career to a system that punished him for his beliefs, found his way back, and then spent his final years as one of the most beloved grandfathers in American television history. The show was significantly enriched by his presence, and his story, once known, adds an indelible layer to every scene he appeared in. Ellen Corby joined the Waltons as Grandma Esther Walton, bringing a sharpness and dry wit that balanced Grandpa Zeb's warmth with perfect precision. She had worked as a character actress for decades before landing this role, with a film career reaching back to the 1940s and an Academy Award nomination for her work in I Remember Mama in 1948. By the time she joined the show in her early 60s, she possessed the long professional experience to understand exactly what kind of character she was developing and how to protect that character's integrity throughout a long run. Audiences responded immediately and remained devoted across every season. Grandma Walton became one of the show's most quotable and beloved figures, a woman capable of conveying everything a full scene of dialogue could not with just a single glance. Ellen Corby won 3 Primetime Emmy Awards for the role, in 1973, 1976, and 1977, a level of sustained recognition reflecting the remarkable consistency of her on-screen performances. Then, in November 1976, during production of Season 5, the 66-year-old Corby suffered a severe stroke. The stroke significantly affected her speech and mobility, and her ability to return to the demanding schedule of a weekly drama series was genuinely uncertain. The show's creators faced a decision about how to handle her absence and made a choice that was particularly thoughtful for that era of television production. Rather than quietly recasting the role or having Grandma Walton conveniently visit distant relatives indefinitely, they incorporated the stroke directly into the show's storyline. Grandma Walton suffered a stroke on screen, and the family's response to it, the fear, the adjustment, the slow and incomplete recovery, became part of the ongoing narrative. This decision meant Ellen Corby's real medical situation was acknowledged rather than concealed, and her eventual return to the set was built into the story in a way that felt earned rather than arbitrary. She did return, beginning with Season 7, though her appearances were reduced compared to what they had been before the stroke. The physical effects of what she had endured were visible in her performances, but the production worked around those limitations with genuine care. She continued appearing through the final seasons and returned for the reunion movies that began airing in the 1980s. What this entire period reveals about the culture of the production is worth contemplating. The Waltons regularly depicted a family responding to hardship with practical compassion rather than denial, and the decision to write Corby's stroke into the story rather than pretend it had not happened was a small act of creative integrity that aligned the show's real behavior with the values it broadcast every week. That alignment does not happen automatically. Someone had to decide that was how it would be handled. Michael Learned came to the Waltons in 1972 as Olivia Walton, the family's mother, transforming what could have been a functional supporting role into something considerably more complex and enduring. Olivia was patient, deeply principled, and sometimes quietly exhausted in ways the show permitted to show on screen, a woman navigating the specific pressures of Depression-era motherhood with a faith and stubbornness that felt genuinely human rather than sentimentalized. The television industry consistently recognized her work. Michael Learned won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Drama Series 4 times for the role, in 1973, 1974, 1976, and 1979. 4 Emmy Awards for the same character on the same show across a 7-year span is a level of sustained recognition that very few performers in the history of American drama television have ever matched. And then, after Season 7, she left anyway. The reason she has given across various interviews over the years is honest and, once you hear it, completely understandable. She was exhausted. Not exhausted by the character specifically, and not exhausted by the people she worked alongside. She has consistently spoken about her castmates and the show itself with genuine warmth across all the decades since. But 9 to 10 months of demanding production every year, for 7 consecutive seasons, had worn her down in a way that 4 Emmy statuettes sitting on a shelf could not compensate for. She wanted to do other work. She wanted a life that was not entirely consumed by a production schedule. She wanted to be able to choose. The show wrote her departure by giving Olivia Walton tuberculosis, a disease that required the character to leave the mountain and go to a sanitarium for extended treatment. It was a story solution that preserved the character's dignity, provided a reasonable explanation for the absence, and left the door open for Learned to return when she was ready. She did eventually return for later episodes and the reunion movies that followed the series, but the specific weight that Olivia Walton had carried as the emotional and moral center of the family did not fully redistribute across the rest of the cast in her absence. Something particular about the show's texture changed. What is instructive about Michael Learn's departure, especially when placed alongside Richard Thomas's, is how different the underlying motivations were. Thomas left chasing something larger, a film career, a more creative range, the fear of being permanently defined by a single role. Learn left to recover something that the show had gradually consumed: time, energy, the basic capacity to be a full person outside a production schedule that had absorbed 7 years of her life. Both of those are legitimate reasons to leave. But they point toward two genuinely different ways that a long-running, successful show can cost its performers something that never appears in the credits or the ratings. John Walmsley played Jason Walton across all 9 seasons of The Waltons, and if you watched the show during its original run, you know exactly which one Jason was: the musical Walton, the one with the guitar and the piano and the particular quietness that comes from someone who processes the world through sound rather than language. The character's musical gifts were written into the show's fabric from the beginning, which was not accidental. Walmsley was a genuinely trained musician before he was an actor, and the show leaned directly into that. What the weekly audience watching Jason play guitar on the farmhouse porch could not have known was that the tension built into the character, between staying on the mountain and chasing something the mountain could not contain, was not entirely fictional. Walmsley had real musical ambitions that existed independently of the show, ambitions that the demands of 9 months of annual television production made genuinely difficult to pursue at the level he wanted. He stayed through the entire run. Unlike Richard Thomas, he did not leave mid-series to test what waited on the other side. But after the show ended in 1981, his path made clear where his real investment had always been. He moved toward music composition and production work rather than continuing to pursue acting roles, building a post-show career that had far more to do with what Jason Walton loved in the scripts than with the industry that had given Walmsley his platform in the first place. His post-show trajectory is genuinely different from almost every other cast member's, specifically because it does not read as an exit from anything. It reads as a return to something that had been waiting. The show gave him visibility. What he did with that visibility was walk steadily back toward music, which had always been the actual work, and let the acting career that came with 9 years of national television simply recede behind him without apparent regret. The Waltons asked something of its cast that most television productions do not explicitly name but that everyone involved eventually comes to feel. It asked them to be, week after week across 9 years of production, the embodiment of something the American public wanted deeply to believe was real: a family that held together through genuine hardship, that kept its values intact under sustained pressure, that chose each other consistently even when the choosing required something real. That is a significant thing to carry for 9 months of every year, year after year, for the full run of a long series. Ralph Waite played John Walton Sr., the father of the family, across all 9 seasons, and his experience with the production carries its own specific weight. Waite had been managing alcohol dependency during portions of the production, something he became more publicly candid about in later years, long after the show had ended. He stayed through the entire run of the series, but the personal discipline that required, showing up to scenes that asked him to embody steadiness and reliability during periods when he was privately fighting something significant, was a different kind of challenge than anything written into the scripts. He later became an ordained minister, and the religious dimension of the Walton family's life, which had always been a quiet but consistent thread running through the show, seemed to deepen in personal meaning for him rather than existing purely as professional material. He worked consistently in television and film after the series ended and remained connected to the Waltons' legacy through reunion productions and public appearances until his death in 2014 at the age of 85. What all of these departures, absences, and private struggles reveal, taken together, is something about what sustained creative work actually costs the people doing it, and about how rarely the audience watching factors those costs into the warmth they feel sitting with a beloved show. The Waltons built its reputation and its cultural staying power on depicting the resilience of ordinary people under real pressure. The actors who built that reputation were themselves under real pressure that the show never depicted. Richard Thomas came back for the reunion movies. Michael Learn came back. The reunion productions that aired through the 1980s and into the 1990s reassembled much of the original cast for stories that followed the Walton family across later decades, and those productions carried their own particular quality, the genuine warmth of people who had been through something significant together and found, after time and distance and the complicated feelings that follow any long professional relationship, that the connection between them had survived all of it. The show premiered in September 1972, reached the top of the Nielsen ratings in its early seasons, won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Drama Series, and ran for 9 full seasons before its final episode aired in 1981. Earl Hamner Jr. created all of it from his own childhood memories of growing up in Schuyler, Virginia, and watched it become something considerably larger than any single creative vision can fully account for. The family he invented out of his own past gave a generation of American viewers something they were actively looking for during the 1970s: stability, continuity, the image of people who stayed. What it cost the people who played that family is a harder, quieter, and more honest story than the one the goodnight scenes told. The Waltons spent 9 seasons making the case that a family is most itself when it refuses to let go of each other during the hard years. So what does it actually mean that the people who built that family kept leaving, kept struggling with things the show never put on screen, and kept coming back anyway, not because the production required it but because something about what they had made together was genuinely worth returning to? And if the real story of the Waltons includes all of the departures and the private costs alongside the warmth that made it beloved, does that make everything the show said about family feel more true, or does it complicate it in ways that are harder to sit with than a simple goodnight? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. If you enjoyed this unveiling, please like, comment, and subscribe for more untold Hollywood tales, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Want more content? Check out another of our videos. Thank you for watching.